Welcome to the Vacay Podcast. I'm Ryan Alford, your co-host, joined by my partner in crime, my co-host, Chris Hansen down in hot Miami. Today, we're excited. We've got a great guest. We're talking to the Canna Mom. We're talking to the founder of Emily Cowell Nutrition. She's a registered dietitian, nutritionist. 3 words I love. Don't like to say them on the podcast, but I've made it through. What's up, Emily?
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Hey, excited to have you. Appreciate you coming on. We love what you're doing. Excited to shine the light even further on all the benefits of natural wellness. So near and dear, I think we're all speaking from the same playbook.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Chris, what's up, brother? How we doing today?
Phenomenal. Super excited to be here. Happy to have Emily on. I'm really excited to hear what she has to say. And I love having someone else on that's, aligned with us and our mission, and just looking forward to learning more about her and her path.
I know. Excited. Emily, let's tee it up for everybody. We'll save the drama. Let's talk your story and what brought your passion into cannabis and alternative wellness. And, let's just give everybody a little bit of a taste of your background.
Absolutely. So who I am today is just so different from who I was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was going to college, putting myself through school to become a registered dietitian. And I was using cannabis because it helped me so much in school. It helped me manage my anxiety. It helped me manage my depression. But I was so terrified that anyone would ever find out that I used cannabis. I thought it would be detrimental to my career, and I thought that people would judge me. And so I spent a lot of years, I worked in a hospital. I did all of the things that I was traditionally supposed to do. On the backside, I was a cannabis consumer, and I really felt like a fraud in who I was. And at the time, I had started building up a blog, a food blog, and I was on the Instagram, and I just felt so inauthentic. I was not being my real self. I was talking about health and wellness. I'm a dietitian, obviously plant-based foods, all of the above. But there was this whole wellness aspect of me that I was holding back from people. I wasn't sharing the one true thing that made me my healthiest, best self. And so I remember back in 2019, CBD came on the marketplace and it really blew up and people were so interested in it. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll just talk a little bit about CBD and see how it goes, because that was safe at the time. And people were so interested. They're like, we need to learn more about cannabis. And so I officially came out of the cannabis closet in 2019. I ripped off that Band-Aid. I said to the world, hey, here I am. I use cannabis every day and it helps me be a better person and a better mom. And since then, my career has blossomed. My life has gotten so much better. And so I truly believe that not only has cannabis helped me mentally, physically, and emotionally, but it has helped me socially and with my career as well. So that's kind of like a quick little overview, but cannabis has been such a really beautiful part of my 10-year journey.
That's great, Emily. And I think what I want to set the table for everybody, like the designation, because I think when you hear cannabis and people hear that, immediately you think of, I think the stigma is, okay, I'm smoking a joint or a pipe or I'm doing things like that. And I imagine, maybe in college, like you mentioned 10 years ago or something, there was probably some form of those things. But I think, the usage of cannabis, the amounts of THC, the benefits of these things, I think it's good to kind of set the stage for, what are we talking about here as far as how it's being used, the dosage, and those types of things of where you've kind of been and where you've kind of gotten to.
Yeah. So I always tell people, as a dietitian, I kind of like to break it down like food. And so cannabis is a word just like diet is a word. But from that, we can have so many different offshoots. So when we talk about diet, we talk about, vegan versus carnivore. There's 2 totally different ends of the spectrum. Cannabis is the same way, THC versus CBD. But we also have all these other different diets, just like we have all these other different cannabinoids. We have Delta 8, we have Delta 9, we have CBN, CBG. And so it's an education process for people in understanding that cannabis really is an umbrella term to kind of get the whole plant. But when you get into it, there are different applications methods. There are different dosages. There are different cannabinoids. And just like in your diet, there are different meals you're going to eat. There's different macros you're going to follow. There's different things that are unique to each one of us. And that's one of the things I always want to drive home for people about cannabis is using cannabis is all about finding what works personally for you in your unique body. We all have the endocannabinoid system. And just like a diet is not a one-size-fits-all approach for people, a cannabis regimen is not a one-size-fits-all approach for people too. And so if we can start to look at cannabis the way we look at food and diet and how we understand that we all need something different, I think it becomes easier for people to understand that we're talking about a lot here, but with a little education, you can know what you're talking about.
It's crazy to me, listening to you speak and like thinking about it, and Chris and I get on our soapbox a lot about, the plant-based versus lab-based, but all the varieties of things that you just described that fall under cannabis and the just different ways it can be used, the different effects that it has, and that it's not just about the stigma of being, stoned, Yeah. And I was trying to think of an analogy. For some reason, I went to like tomatoes, like how many different kinds of tomatoes there are.
I've used that before, actually, for different cultivars. I have it. But there's a Roma tomato, there's a cherry tomato, there's
tomatoes. Yeah,
different. It's a good analogy.
Yeah. But talk to me, like, about that journey and how it, being a dietitian. When and how was it like immediately like working that into, things and what you did, becoming a dietitian, or was it because of your past and using it, your comfort level with it, and as you started, becoming a voice for it, where did it start to work into the diet side of things?
For so long, I never really realized that I could combine them. I thought it was either one or the other. I'm either a dietitian or I'm a cannabis educator. Dietitians, they're kind of an uptight bunch. They're not all like me. I had a lot of judgment and stigma from my quote unquote community. And so I didn't think that I could intertwine them. However, the more I worked with people in their cannabis regimen, the more I noticed that when people use cannabis and feel better, ultimately what happens is they feel so well that they start to eat better. They start to exercise. They start to adopt all of these different healthy behaviors because of the absence of pain, because of the absence of anxiety. And so I really realized that, okay, yes, cannabis first, but nutrition can come second. And if we built those together, for so many people, it is an absolute lifestyle game changer.
I've got a question. So say I'm a client, I find you on Instagram, DM you, I'm like, hey, I want to work with you. What type of clients are you dealing with? What do you see being the main reasons people are reaching out to you? And then kind of give me like a quick summary of like, how do you take, like say I come to you and say, hey, I want to get a better nutrition going. I also have so let's say seasonal depression, because we were talking about that earlier. What would you recommend? Like, where do you start?
So most people really need to start with like the basics. I try and get people on like the first article I can give them. It's new to your cannabis journey, start here. And it really spells out like the ABC. Because when we think about it, we are void of any type of basic education. And that's the biggest issue that we have. So if I start them with a foundation of basic education, I let them read through that and I say, come back to me and let me know what you're considering. Because when we think about people and how they operate, people are very specific in their lifestyles and their needs. So there's going to be a lot of people who come to me and say, well, I want to use cannabis, but it's not for me because I don't want to smoke. And so my job is then to come in and say, well, actually, there's 7 other ways that you can use cannabis that don't involve smoking. And so really what you're doing is working with each individual and say, okay, so you have pain. So we're going to experiment with this cannabinoid at this dosage, and we're going to work with that. But it's, again, so individualized. And I did this so much when I was working as a dietitian, is honing in on that individual need. And the same thing is for cannabis. You have to figure out, what are people's lifestyles? What are their non-negotiables? What are they willing to do? Are they motivated enough to do it? And is it worth putting in the effort? Because truly, I always tell people cannabis is trial and error. It's not like you try it once and you're like, whoa, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want. Now, some people it is. And if you are, that's lucky. But for people who are managing chronic health conditions, they really need to experiment with cannabis in different forms, in different dosages, and in different application methods so that they can discover what is right for them. And in most cases, that takes a while. That can take several days to several weeks. If you're working with edibles, it's not something that happens very quickly. You need to give period of time. And so I always tell people, understand that it is an actual journey that requires patience and dedication when you're really ready to step in and truly embrace cannabis for all that it can offer.
So let's.
I love how you go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. So, I mean, along that line, so we love adding value on the podcast and being like as specific as possible. So there's 7 other uses besides smoking, and down the line that Chris was asking, like with nutrition and the benefits. Give me like an idea of a type of regimen, a type of cannabis that you'd recommend, a dosage, and maybe something that it helps within and I know everything is personalized when you're working with someone, but just give us maybe like a hyper specific example of an exact dosage, an exact type, like, and an exact thing that it's addressing.
So the most common, let's pretend we have Amy. She's a 32-year-old mom, and she's coming to me because she is stressed to the max with her kids and her family, and she's drinking too much at night, and she knows something needs to change. She's eating like shit. She feels like shit, and she's like, I need to change something. So with Amy, we say, you know what, if you're dealing with anxiety, what we want to do is we want to start with CBD, because we know that too much THC can induce anxiety. So we experiment with CBD for a little bit, and CBD you can be a lot more generous with because it doesn't have the intoxicating properties. So 10 to 15 milligrams, let's start that, whether you prefer to smoke it, whether you prefer to use oil, a gummy, that is a personal preference, but let's start with 10 to 15 milligrams. Let's do that for a week, come back and let's reassess. And let's say she comes back in a week and she says, it's okay, but it's not really what I'm looking for. Okay, perfect. Our next step is to baby step in that THC. And so depending on the level of anxiety for people, it really depends on what they're comfortable with, what each person is ready for. But between 2 to 5 milligrams of THC is a safe place to start. And that way, I always tell moms, do it after the kids have gone to bed, when you don't have anything to worry about, when you don't have any responsibilities. Give it some time, play with it, see how it works. And then we'll reassess after that. Was 2 milligrams not enough? Did you not feel anything? Was 5 milligrams way too much? Did it leave you feeling awful? And then we go from there. But it's always all about baby stepping, because ultimately we know THC is a remedy for a lot of things. However, too much THC is an absolute detriment for most people. In most cases, when people have tried cannabis in high school, they ate a brownie in the backfield with their friends and had the worst experience ever because they consumed too much THC. My ultimate goal is to avoid that, because then when that happens to people, they are so afraid of cannabis that they don't want to try it again. And I don't want to take that option off the table for people. I want people to understand that they can do this smart and safe and effectively.
Yeah. I've been down that brownie path. Oh.
Yes, and if I could save people
Chris, I think you're on mute, brother. Chris, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I think they're doing construction in my building. So
Hey,
I don't know
it
if you
wouldn't
guys
be
can hear in
real
the background.
if there wasn't real things going on.
I know. I'm living a normal real life with real life problems going on. My dog was barking. I think they're drilling upstairs.
Yeah, did you hit the pipe while that was going on? To calm a little.
You nailed it. Where we talk about this all the time about our product Vacay. Obviously, I was so tired of hearing people be turned off by cannabis because they went to Colorado once for novelty's sake. They go to the dispensary. And the dispensary, is recommending him a product that's like a serving size of a 25 milligram, which is insane. Like, right. Like, why is that the standard? Like that, because you're losing more people as looking at this as a therapeutic or a medicine. I mean, I always compare it to like, you're not going to go out drinking for your first time ever and do Jaeger bombs and drink 151. Like, it's probably going to end up with you on the toilet puking. Like, you're not going to want to repeat that. So do you work with a lot of people who have never experimented with cannabis, or that it's people that have had negative experiences?
It's so funny. The majority of my clientele, which I never really anticipated this when I got into this, is older individuals, people 50s,
Love it.
70s, and 80s. And so their experience is usually, I tried it in the 60s and 70s, and I either loved it so much or I didn't love it, but I had to stop because of societal pressures as I went through my life. I had a family, I had a job, I had to stop. So they've tried it before, but it was lifetimes ago. And what's on the marketplace today is not what was on the marketplace and available for them back then. The cannabis that was available, we know like the THC levels were, who knows, but they weren't what they are now. I mean, there was probably 5 to 10%, and now we're looking at 20 to 30%. And so it really is a whole different marketplace for them because they could only get flower back then. Now we're introducing tinctures and concentrates and dryer vaporizers, and they're like, what are you talking about? And so they are curious, but they're also cautious, and they're also a little bit optimistic because in the older generation in their communities, they are talking about the amazing benefits that they're getting from cannabis, and they're hearing that their friends are seeing success. And so they want to experiment for themselves and find that success. But if they have had that bad experience in the past, they are very, very cautious, which they should be. I agree with that.
Yeah. Sure. You're so right.
What's the, talking with Emily Cowell, registered dietitian, nutritionist, and certified Canamom. I love that term. It was in Emily's profile on Instagram, so I'm just going to call her the Canamom from now on. But talk to me, Emily, about like as cannabis relates to the, you're a dietitian, so it's much broader than just cannabis. So talk to me about the relationship with food, or maybe recipes or other things like that as to the whole nutrition plan and how you go about it.
So in my bigger vision of the world, I really see cannabis being a part of like the old school homesteader lifestyle where you're growing your own food, you're growing your own medicine, and you know how to process it. Now, we don't all live that lifestyle anymore, but what I'd love to see is some self-sufficiency in cannabis, just like we have self-sufficiency in food. I live on a 3-acre farm up in New York State. We grow all of our fruits, all of our own vegetables. And I really want to show people that just as you grow your own fruits and vegetables, you can grow your own cannabis plant. And what I'm finding is the people who are already gardening, especially my older clientele, who then add in cannabis, they find it to be this really almost spiritual experience of growing the plant and then harvesting it and then turning it into a medicine or a product that they can use. And I really think that that is a lifestyle in and of itself for certain individuals who take the time to make things. It's the people who take the time to cook from scratch, who are taking the time to make their canna butter from scratch. And now it's really nice that we do live in a society where you can buy canna butter online. If you don't want to make it, a lot of us live a really fast-paced lifestyle. We don't have time to do that. But for a lot of people, integrating that is more of a lifestyle factor. And that really just goes in with that homesteading, grow your own food, make your food from scratch. And of course, we don't all live like that. I get that. But in everyday life, my older generation, growing their own cannabis is the new hobby of the century. It's their favorite thing to do. And so for a lot of people, it's a very spiritual experience growing a cannabis plant.
Absolutely. Let's just go down the road. I didn't want to get on the legal path, but how do you balance that? And has that been an issue at all for you being an advocate? And, I'm not seeing anything that you're doing, and I've read up on your website and stuff. I'm not seeing anything that from my point of view, looks illegal. But talk about the law aspect, as crazy as it is, as Chris and I mentioned.
Some challenges you deal with that, holding back healing, really.
You step back every step of the way working in cannabis. And if I wasn't so passionate about it, I don't know if I would do it because it's just roadblock after roadblock. And even though I continue to get every license that I'm supposed to, I jump through every hoop that I'm supposed to, New York State continues to change the laws as they see fit as we go along. So then there's a new bar, there's a new standard. I'm constantly chasing, and then we're still waiting on federal legalization. So I have even though it's legal in my state, in New York State, federally it's not illegal. So I just can't tell you how many accounts I've had shut down. PayPal, Stripe. I got denied for health insurance because I work in the cannabis industry. My bank accounts have been closed. There have been so many roadblocks in this. And it really makes me wonder, why are people really, really trying to stop this information is being put out there, because there's something bigger than just a random girl talking about cannabis on the internet. And it really, sometimes I'm like, if I didn't really love what I'm doing, I would be like, to hell with this, because it's every day. It's something new, some new roadblock in the cannabis industry. And it's just so frustrating.
So what gives you that drive to keep pushing through all of that? I mean, obviously the passion, and I kind of wanted to ask you along that line, like, because you said you were kind of a cannabis closet user, for a long time. What motivated you to kind of get out and speak your truth? And also, how did you feel after that? Like, because that's a leap of faith, that's a big thing to kind of go public about that and embrace it. So like, obviously I want more people to embrace that. So I want you to share like what led you up to coming out with that truth. And then what was the result after? Like, what have you felt after?
I was on a dietitian retreat. I was in Arizona. I was sitting by the pool, and I was like, I'm such a fake person. Like, who I am here is a lie. It's not who I present myself to be. It's not who I am in my hotel room. And I was like, I cannot stand this anymore. Like, I'm so sick of just not being myself. And I remember sitting next to that pool, and I wrote this whole I'm coming out of the cannabis closet piece. I published it, and it was the biggest weight off my shoulders. I was like, okay, you know what? No one can out me anymore. I was always afraid someone was going to like out me, like Emily Cowell, cannabis consumer. And I was like, I'll just out myself. And that way I don't have to worry about anything. And it's not like, my parents have always been supportive and known. It's not like I was worried about them. I was more worried about strangers.
Sure.
And when I really realized that I don't really care what other people think of me. It's none of my business what other people think of me. And if I'm doing something that has so greatly improved the quality of my life, I'm not going to apologize for it. And I think that's why I feel so passionate about sharing it with other people now, is because it has so greatly impacted the quality of my life that I think that other people deserve that as well. And when I was working as a dietitian in a hospital, it was the worst job ever. It was disgusting. I was a glorified waitress, and not once ever did I ever feel like I actually helped somebody in their life. And now every day I get emails from people saying, you have changed my life in XYZ amount of ways. And that to me is what keeps me going, is because it really is making an impact on people's lives, their ability to get off prescription medications, their ability to live life without pain, their ability to rekindle relationships because they're not a miserable asshole anymore. There are so many great stories that's just what keeps me going, because I feel like everybody deserves that.
Let's call a spade a spade. I think you used the key phrase, getting people off prescription drugs. So
there we go.
I wonder why that it's such the red herring, still. I mean, and so I mean, and look, I grew up. I'm very affluent, moved, world traveled, and all that stuff. But grew up in South Carolina, very conservative state, and even family now. It's gotten a little better, but the way people talk and criminalize these things that they really don't even understand, and it's all fueled by the federal government and a lot of other things. And I'm not here. I'm like, Chris and I are not trying to fight the federal government, but we're just more trying to shine the light on the ironies of some of these things. Of hundreds of years ago, when pharmaceuticals and lab-based solutions didn't exist, we healed ourselves naturally through plant-based medicines and other things. And at some point that flipped, and now it's the opposite, where we put this red herring on plant-based things like cannabis. But there's still so much education that needs to happen. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've realized. Fighting the misinformation.
Yes. Like, okay, imagine in high school, you have health class. Imagine if the narrative on cannabis was tweaked just a little bit. And if they just changed it, instead of saying, instead of lumping it in with coke and heroin and everything else, say, cannabis is here and a lot of people use it as medicine. And while it's not right for teenagers, it can help with XYZ. And when you're ready, it might be a viable option. Imagine if we changed just that, and what impact that would have on the next generation. That's the only thing we would change.
Yeah.
And I think we have a huge, different mindset.
Or reading about the stories of, chemotherapy patients using it as a beneficial thing. You don't ever hear the pros. It's always negative.
Yes.
Propaganda, honestly.
Yeah. Crazy, when you see one single news story, child gets into parents' cannabis gummies.
Oh God. Every Halloween, look out for edibles. First of all, no one's giving out their edibles for free to children on Halloween.
Ever.
Yeah.
It's just that, they got to take that one thing. They got to keep it scary. And they don't want people like us who are successful, who are articulate, who are smart, who are educated, who are living a high quality life to come out and say this. They want the stereotype perpetuated that if you use cannabis, you will become a loser. And they cannot stand people who absolutely smash that stereotype because it goes against everything that the only thing they have on cannabis is it'll turn you into a loser. There's really no other negative side effect aside from, whatever they make up.
Right.
But they just keep telling people that. And those in the 60s and 70s who were told that for 10, 20 years still believe it. But for this next generation, they know better. And if they continue to see people like us, see real role models out there of people who are living successful lives while using cannabis and making a difference, it's going to change the future, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Emily, I'll even go one step further. I have a show. I'm co-owner of a brand, and I don't even regularly use cannabis. I don't even regularly use our product, but I believe in it, and I've tested it and been part of testing because I know what it can do. And if I got in severe pain, it'd be the first thing that I would use. But I don't personally need it. But I will talk about it and educate because I'm educated and I understand it and I believe in it. And so that even goes further. It's not like I'm a cannabis everyday user. No, I don't even. I've used our products maybe once in 2 months, other than the CBD roll-on for pain that we have that actually works. But as far as the ingesting of it, I don't. But I talk about it because that's how much of a craziness I think it is that there's the miseducation is out there.
Exactly. My husband does not use cannabis. He's fully involved in this business, but THC is not for him. It's not
right.
Like it. But going for anybody listening, it's okay if cannabis is not your thing. Cannabis doesn't have to be for everybody, and that's okay. But just like food, that doesn't mean you don't have to know about it or be able to discuss it. You can still have a conversation about it, especially if it helps somebody in your life. Husband, son, family. If you could be a support system, whether you use it or not, you are helping somebody.
I agree. I think just getting the word out there, breaking the stigma, knowing that it's another tool that can be used if it works for you. Like you said, everyone's different. I'm a little bit more of a frequent user of our products probably than Ryan is. Although my background's a little bit different. But as far as, and I'm not even like a daily cannabis person at that. And I think people need to realize, like, sometimes you take Advil when you got a headache. I remember I've had friends that were not cannabis people that suffered from horrible migraines, my mom included. And I know our product was one of those things I could kind of be like, dude, just try it. And it's like, oh my gosh, this works. It's like, yeah, dude, keep in your medicine cabinet. Take it every other month if you got a migraine, like as needed, right? Like it's not people look at it like, it's some decision. I'm not into that. It's like, you don't have to be into it, but just see that it's there and it's an available medicine for certain things.
People just think of it as the stoner drug. It's the guys and girls on the couch or hiding behind the barn and taking a puff. And, that's just the stigma, it's not it.
Listening to Led Zeppelin wearing tie-dye, which,
Yeah, which is not me. I am not in that vibe whatsoever. And that's why I want to show people is that there's not just one kind of person that uses cannabis. There are so many different people from different walks of life who use cannabis, whether you know it or not. You probably have a lot of people in your life who use cannabis and you just don't know it because they don't share it with you.
What's funny is in the entrepreneurial world, I know more entrepreneurs that are more likely to use a cannabis product than even alcohol now. Like
I'm seeing the exact same shift of buy alcohol, microdosing in cannabis.
Right. It's funny because the people most restricted are the corporate, people, which honestly they probably need the most. I hate saying
really, and
stress
it shouldn't matter what kind of job you have. You should be able to use cannabis without feeling like you're a criminal, or like you might go to jail or lose your job, especially if at the end of the day, it makes you a better employee. If it makes you more productive. And for a lot of people, it does. If you're not using while you're actually at work, if you're using it to decompress after work, live a better quality life, you come back to work more refreshed. You're more productive and you're a better employee.
Yeah.
Emily, talk to us about your nutrition line and, some of the specific things that we've talked about it like broadly, but like how you're helping people, how people, find you and what you do with them, and then your products and things like that.
Yeah, so the product line came out of truly a necessity from our customers. So we originally started posting cannabis recipes. And during COVID, it actually was a blessing for us. Everybody was home on the internet searching for recipes. Everyone wanted to learn how to make canna butter and brownies. So we posted recipes, and that's how we really started with our success. And then people started saying, well, I want to make the brownies, but I don't want to make the canna butter. What can I do? And so we were like, let's make a canna butter. Let's bring it to market. And so we spent a lot of time working with our distributors to figure out a way that we could make it where it contains less than 0.3% THC by volume, so that we can ship it out to our customers, our older folks in Texas and Arkansas and Idaho who have no other option. And so it's just grown from there, and it's become a really... I never expected that I would get into a product line, that I would create something. But when I realized that I created something that actually helps people and actually like allows them to live a better quality life, it just feels so comfortable and natural now.
How do you, I'm looking at your website as we're talking, and, you've got some stuff about growing cannabis specifically here. What are people legally allowed to do or not allowed to do? Like, I hate to keep going back to the legal thing, but like, where does that, start and stop?
It's all state by state. It really depends on where you live. So in New York State, right now, they have some very shady laws going on. The way it's written is that a recreational consumer is not allowed to grow cannabis until the legal market has been set up and operational for 18 months. So technically in New York State, only medical consumers are allowed to grow right now. So I have my medical card. I'm technically allowed to grow 4 plants under that medical card. But every state is different, and it does depend on whether or not you have your medical card or not. So if you're, say, in Ohio, and if you have a medical card, you could probably grow up to 12 plants, where if you don't have a card, you can grow 0 plants. So it's all very, very specific to your state. And then ultimately it comes down to your personal preference. I grew long before it was legal, and I really wasn't too concerned about what would happen. So it really just depends on how you feel about it and what you're willing to do and your situation. I live on a 3-acre farm in the middle of nowhere. I'm not worried about someone coming up. But if you live in a high rise in New York City, you've got an issue to think about.
Right. Yeah. You got it grown in your closet with the UV lights at Brunswick College.
And then figure out where to vent that smell.
Yeah. It's still, even hearing you talk, it blows my mind just thinking that like other men think they have the right to tell us what God gave us and what we can grow and how we can grow it. I mean, this applies, I guess, to a lot of anything natural, any plants, but it just never ceases to rattle me, honestly, of like,
I've always been kind of a rule breaker too. I'm always like, you can't tell me I can't do this. And I'm going to, and if you want to catch me, fine, catch me. But I mean, they don't put criminals in jail anymore anyway, so I'm not worried.
I knew you had to give another title, Rule Breaker, Emily Cowell.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like it's almost like parallel with my life. I've always been like that as a teenager, my poor parents, and now like what I'm doing as a career. It's just my core value is freedom. And so I don't like it when someone tries to take any one of my freedoms away, and it bothers me. And the same goes for cannabis, especially like, okay, so in New York State, I can do anything I want. I come here to Florida. Nothing is legal here. I mean, they're so backwards. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's the scary part is, we live in a free country. Sort of.
Okay, sure.
It's the greatest country on earth. I mean, I'm a flag bearing, USA loving, but when you do think about we're a few of the line, I think we have it much better than anyone else. And so I'm not getting on in any way anti-American, but more like where the lines get drawn on certain freedoms and certain laws, and where the government tells you
true American freedoms. Let's go, everybody do your own thing. As long as you're not bugging anybody else, you should be allowed to do what you want to do.
Right.
Essentially, it's like there's rules until whoever's voting on it is placed as a board member of one of the cannabis companies, and all of a sudden they're pro cannabis, and you know, it's It's
I've seen it
unfortunate.
so much in New York State, and it's just so old now. It's predictable. It's just, my true calling in life is I want to teach everybody how to take one single seed, plant it in the ground, grow all your own medicine, and say to hell with everybody else. I don't need your taxes. I don't need anything. I can do it on my own. Like self-sufficiency in cannabis is important to me.
Yeah.
And I would say that I think there's a movement in self-sufficiency in general. Like, I feel like even myself, like my goal is like, go get 20 acres, build a barn dominium, probably have my own gun range, grow some food, have some animals. And I feel like that's a common theme I hear amongst a lot of our generation, where people are like, you know what? F this. Like, I'm going off the grid, because that's the only way you can ensure that your food is hopefully healthy and clean.
Yes.
And I'm like, we said freedom.
COVID, we saw what happened. To think that wouldn't happen again in our lifetime is crazy. And so, I mean, my husband is like Mr. Doomsday Prepper, got his backpack and all the things. Like when our 3-acre farm in upstate New York, as much time as we spend in Florida, we will never get rid of that, because we raise animals, we grow food, we have lots of different things that we have down here in Florida. And that self-sufficiency is very, very important, because we live in a crazy world these days. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
And it's so much broader than cannabis. There's so many plants and things, and saffron for anxiety. I mean, there's so many like things you could grow yourself that to self-medicate
each one can have
on
a
certain
purpose.
levels. Yeah, and I think just like we can't classify every, we don't want cannabis and other things classified in certain categories. There's certain a time and a place for traditional medicine.
Yes.
I think I always want to make sure of that, because one day I might be in the hospital needing a doctor. Like, I'm not against all doctors here. I just want to make sure we're using our brains fully across the whole spectrum, pun intended. But Emily, where can everybody keep up with everything you're doing online, social media, etc.?
Yeah, so everything is over at emilycowellnutrition.com. I'm most known for my weekly newsletter, so sign up for that. That goes out on Wednesdays. I used to be a Instagram fangirl. I loved Instagram until they shut down my account. It's up and it's available now. I had a viral video of my son harvesting a cannabis plant, got over 3 million views, and Instagram didn't like that very much. So I don't post there anymore, because I don't want them to take my account down again. Like, what's there, I'll just keep there. So if you need me, Emily Cowell Nutrition is where to find me.
EmilyCowellNutrition.com as well. Really appreciate you coming on, Emily. Really fascinating discussion, insightful and enlightening for people thinking about cannabis in different ways, and the fact that it has a lot of great benefits beyond just what the stigma is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share that with other people.
Great. You know where to find us, folks. Go to takeavacay.com. That's VAYCAY, the only way to truly get away. VAYCAY, vacay. The true vacation. Chris Hansen, my co-host. I'm Ryan Alford. We really appreciate Emily Cowell. We'll see you next time on the Vacay Podcast.